Ladies and gentlemen of Knucklehead Nation, here we are again with Chad George for the great debate over a little bit of whiskey. Let's call it Whiskey and Chad. But for real though, we're going to be talking about something that's been paining me. It's become the bane of my existence. It's friends not wanting to fight their friends or training partners. Chad, I have a problem with this, brother.
I know you do. I know.
I don't like it. Why don't I like it?
Well, you don't like it because you don't understand the dynamic that happens between guys that train together. And then when you have to fight each other, there's a big difference between sparring and fighting. And I think a lot of guys get this misconception of what it really means to go out there and fight. And not to knock you, but a lot of promoters and people that work on the back end of the fight industry will never understand actually like what that means until they fight. You know, there's only one way of knowing what the emotions go through it is when you're in there fighting. And I think when two athletes train together, it's almost like this bond that they build with each other, that you've exchanged very deep, intimate feelings that only are exchanged through combat. And if you guys were to fight each other, it's just that it breaks that bond.
This sounds very intimate, which, I'm not really into intimacy that much if it's not.
Drink some more whiskey, that might change.
I got you. Okay, I'm doing that. We've actually got a couple people in the chat right now. Malik Abdul Mu'min, young, was a young amateur. Now he's a young pro. He says, very true. Very true. The thing is, Chad, my thing is, so in a lot of sports, you're going to be playing against your friends. Mm-hmm. I played basketball, I ran track, I played volleyball, I did this kind of stuff. I actually played basketball against my cousin's school one time, and it was very intense. It was me and my cousin playing against each other. But, afterwards we could just hang out, buy each other, lunch or whatever. Not a big deal. I mean, why can't it be like that? It's a sport. Why can't it be like that?
But you got to understand the big difference between the two is that basketball, baseball, football, you guys are playing collectively as a team to beat the other team. When we're talking fighting and combat sports, we are trying to hurt each other. Like, it's big difference. Not jiu-jitsu, you can get out there, get a good tap, and it's easy. You guys can train again. But when it comes to fighting, you guys are trying to go in there and do whatever it takes to finish your opponent. And you never want to be the cause of a major injury to a friend of yours.
Wait a minute. So you just drew a distinction between jiu-jitsu and fighting.
Yes.
Why is it okay to go against your friend in jiu-jitsu where you're also trying to finish the fight, but it's not okay to do so in a fight?
Because with jiu-jitsu, I can choose to tap whenever I want, right? Let's say if I'm having a bad day, I don't really want to be in there, I can tap out. Sure, you can do that in MMA as well. When we're talking boxing and kickboxing, we are throwing punches at each other's faces. We're trying to land shots that could potentially break ribs. We can throw kicks at each other's heads that if I land that kick properly, you are not going to be the same person because of it. And I have to live with that for the rest of my life.
So, I mean, do you think that's subjective? Because what you're saying is you're trying to, you're saying we're trying to throw shots to break people's ribs. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, maybe that's what Chad the Savage George is doing in a striking match.
No. When you're fighting, listen, when you are training to fight another guy in a cage or a ring, you are trying to land shots. Of course, you're not saying, I'm going to break his ribs with a shot, but you are throwing that shot with all intensive purposes of doing as much damage as possible.
Yeah.
Where in jiu-jitsu is also a playful sport. You can play jiu-jitsu. Yeah, of course you can get to the top levels and they call it a fight, but until you're getting punched in the face, like, it changes things. Here's the thing. I've never seen a jiu-jitsu fighter get his nose broken because of a straight right hand in a grappling match.
No. But you can also, this is me being devil's advocate now. You can also play around with sparring and with fight, and there are people that go in there to get a points decision. They're not necessarily, they don't even have the personality, some of these people, to go in there and try to do damage to the other person. I mean, I feel like Chad the Savage George, when he's fighting you, he might be trying to, I'll be honest with you, when I've seen you when I've seen you fight or roll or whatever it is you do, you're going for the finish. You're not hesitating at all. And I think that's the difference between an elite level fighter or somebody that's a true fighter.
But let's look at that in that same perspective, right? I cannot assume what anybody else does other than what my output is, right? So I assume that any adversary that steps up to myself or any of my athletes are coming with the same intention, right? So especially if they're my athletes, I know the way my athletes are going to compete. Putting them against one another, you just answered it for yourself.
Okay, so you're willing to put your guys against each other in a high-stakes jiu-jitsu match?
Not if they don't have to, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a big thing all the time where teammates in jiu-jitsu they will bow out in the finals, and the more senior student will take the medal.
I see.
Right? They won't compete against each other. Teammates won't compete against each other in those tournaments. Yeah, you have friends that might compete against you from separate schools, but you're not going to have teammates that you're going to see at the top level of jiu-jitsu compete against each other. It doesn't happen.
So, I mean, CMMA goes out to a jiu-jitsu tournament. You guys, you know, let's say you run through the competition like a hot knife through butter. Like this whiskey's running through me right now, super hot, and your guys get to the end. It's the winner's gonna be a CMMA kid versus a CMMA kid. Are you not gonna let it happen? What's gonna happen?
If it's a high profile match, the senior student will usually take the medal.
Usually.
Yeah.
So I mean, there are exceptions.
Well, maybe it'll be like an up and coming guy that'll end up taking the podium. But it really depends on the situation. There's been times where I've let some of my younger students say, you know what, if you guys want to do it, I'm gonna go get something to eat while you guys do that. Let me know how it goes. I'm not gonna watch it. I'm not gonna coach it, because for me, they train together all the time. Jiu-jitsu is a training session. We're talking about sparring. Okay, sparring is one thing, but we're talking fighting. I'm not gonna let my guys hurt each other like that.
Would there ever be an exception to that rule?
I mean, listen, there's always an exception, right? Like, let's say we're talking about UFC, and I've got two of the top guys in the world, and both of them are in the same weight class. There's gonna have to be a way for there to be an exception. I would like, we see this all the time where a guy's gonna have to go to another camp, and you know they have to figure things out. Does it cause some turmoil? Probably. Yeah. You know, because then it's like, well, who do you side with? You know, I've had plenty of friends fight each other. I've had plenty of guys come in and say, "Man, like I thought we were like affiliates." Like, no, this is business. If you're either one of my guys, or you're not one of my guys. It's that simple.
Right. So I mean, it's interesting because if there's a lot on the line, you'd make the exception. But you know, in like an amateur bout.
Doesn't make sense.
It wouldn't
make sense. Because I look at it this way, like I got two amateurs, right? They spar together all the time. Why am I going to have them when there's so many other fighters out there?
Yeah.
Fight each other to get the same experience that they already get in the gym.
Yeah.
You know, I want my guys to get more experience by fighting guys they don't know. By going against styles that are going to have to make them better. Not against the same guys they're training with every day, because that makes no sense.
So I'm going to give you it from my point of view now, and this is where it's bothering me.
Good.
So Chad the Savage George, you know, starts his gym, starts to become successful. Let's just say, this is a hypothetical, that CMMA starts becoming successful.
Why is that hypothetical?
And I'm just being a jerk. It's true. This is what's happening now. Guys start cross-training at CMMA or become friends with Chad George. And, you know, we're in Southern California, the mecca of combat sports. There's probably no place as densely populated as this with great gyms. Let's just, you know, call a spade a spade. And, you know, I reach out to guys to try to make a fight, and I get, oh no, I cross train there. Or, oh no, I'm friends with Chad. Or, oh no, we're affiliates with Chad. Then it becomes a situation where, well, hell, you all know each other. Uh, I might try matching them up with somebody else. Maybe they know each other too. I mean, it becomes a real problem for a
Yeah, for
promoter,
sure. I get it. Yeah. But that's where the stakes matter, right? It's the same thing, right? Like, so if we're fighting for like the UFC or Bellator or a world title, or even maybe like a good regional local title,
Yeah.
that might make the difference. But when we're talking an experienced fight for an amateur, it doesn't really make sense. Because these guys are training it, unless they both guys go, hey, like there was that one match that we talked about. We tried setting up one of my junior fighters with a student of a guy that I train.
Yeah.
And we were like, I don't think that's going to happen. I was like, I'm okay with it if he's okay with it. And we tried to make it happen, but it didn't work. It didn't work out in the guy's work schedule. So there are exceptions. But I think when the stakes raise is when it makes more sense for guys that train together to fight each other.
I see. But it's, it's almost strange because if the stakes are high, if the stakes are really high, there's a lot on the line. You would think people would be a bit more careful.
Money talks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it comes down to. Money talks,
Okay.
When you've got a guy, most fighters in general are not exactly financially stable. Where I came from, where I was completely broke. I was homeless, living out of my car, right?
Yeah.
So the general consensus on what a fighter's income is based on what they make in their fights. So when we're talking small level fights, $500, $1,000, that's not going to change a guy's life. I'm not going to fight my friend for that. But when we're talking something that could potentially change my life and change my whole financial outlook, now it might be something to consider.
Was there ever a situation where you had to fight a friend?
I've fought acquaintances, but I've never fought like friends.
Okay.
At least I don't think so.
Not in a sanctioned fight, at least.
No, correct.
Okay. So a couple people in the chat, let's not ignore our fans here. Thank you guys for joining. Much love. Hope you're enjoying some whiskey. If you don't drink whiskey or you don't drink, hope you're enjoying some delicious food or drink. And we got Leo Romero in here. He says we shouldn't fight each other. We're friends. We're not enemies. Muay Thai 23. I think he's from out in Dublin. An interesting contributor. He says if he's your true homie, he would never want to fight you.
Exactly.
And that's what he says.
I mean, listen, when you're fighting, there's a certain level of intensity that comes with it, right? And I know for myself that if I'm fighting a friend, like it changes a lot because you don't want to hurt them.
Yeah.
And think about this. You're gonna have to see them the next day. What if it's a serious injury?
Yeah.
And if they have family, they have kids, and you have to know that was caused by you. Yes, I understand this is a sport, but this is the most violent sport in the world.
So you don't want to hurt your friends, is what you're saying, Chad. I mean, that's funny because, I was doing push-ups, I think it was last week. And, I remember over and over again receiving these kicks to the ribs. But, I guess maybe that was just a mirage.
No, definitely not a mirage. What I'm trying to help you do, George, is I'm trying to let the weakness in your body leave.
So you punctured my ribs so it would come out.
That's it.
Thank you,
That's
brother.
it. I want you to realize that you're not this pussy that you think you are. My wife's over here laughing.
Damn. I'm being emasculated on live YouTube here. Marco Martinez says Chad is 100% right. In fighting, you're trying to hurt your opponent until they cannot continue.
That's it.
Muay Thai 23 again says, I'd call BJJ some heavy friendly competition. Full-on fighting is with venom, bro.
Yeah. And I think that's why, with the rise of combat jiu-jitsu, it shows another aspect of how jiu-jitsu is a competitive sport. But, there are the elements of it, things change when strikes are involved.
Yeah. Muay Thai 23 is also saying, bro, because I guess the table's only partially showing. So he says, bro, show us the lines of coke you're banging. Muay Thai, who do you think we are, man? Listen, I've never done that. And I left Miami a long time ago.
I'm
Mark,
competing this weekend. I'm not seeing this
Yeah,
stuff anyway.
yeah.
I'll leave that for Sunday.
yeah, right. So Marco Martinez says, as someone who knows nothing, what is the difference between rolling and competition? How much harder do you go in a competition? Are you more likely to tap a lot sooner when you roll?
I think when you're rolling, you might tap way earlier. Like if you're just training, depending on the atmosphere that you're in, like the culture we have, we train pretty hard at my academy. And when you compete, sometimes you let things go a little too far. Things get hyperextended, things get popped. Sometimes we go to sleep because we don't tap till it's too late. But the big difference between rolling and competition is how far you actually let that submission go before you say, okay, I'm good, because I need to go train again.
Yeah. Marco Martinez is asking here, does a fighter try not to get too friendly with other fighters in a league like Bellator?
I mean, I guess it depends, I'm not one of those guys that's ever been this tough guy that tries to start shit with any of the guys that you fight or that's in the community. Yeah. It depends on what image that you're trying to either uphold or how you hold yourself.
Yeah. You've got, I know on Saturdays you kind of do an open mat or whatever it is, and guys from all over come through, right? And you've got, obviously, again, the mecca of combat sports. There's guys fighting for Combate. There's guys fighting for Bellator. There's guys fighting for the UFC. All of them are coming into your gym. Do you ever see like a little bit of animosity maybe between some of these guys? Maybe they're trying to prove a point. Like
sometimes, listen, we are alphas, So anytime you get a room full of alpha males, there's always going to be some testosterone that goes a little too far, and you got to, and they're getting tested. It happens, Like there's no gym that actually produces real fighters and real athletes that this doesn't happen. Yeah. Now we have a culture where we try to keep it down. But you could feel it in the air when it's going to be one of those days.
Have you ever been in a situation where it got like really crazy in there?
Of course. Listen, I'm no angel.
Yeah.
There's been those days where I walk into the gym and I'm having a bad day and I wasn't able to leave it outside that door, and I take it out on the first guy that's right there, and that's not the right answer. But of course, listen, I'm a fighter. I'm full of testosterone. I've got the alpha genes that flow through me, and I'm just as guilty as other guys. It's me not controlling my own shit. That's what it comes down to. Yeah. Sometimes we get hit with a shot and we think it was personal, when the real answer was, okay, how do I respond to this? And if I want to respond with the same intensity or more, it's only going to escalate even beyond that. And sometimes people are welcoming that. Like I have a couple of my guys right now. I was actually just having a conversation with them about it. I said, listen, you guys can do that shit together. I don't want to see you do that to everybody else, because it's a full out war every time they spar together, like a war.
Oh my God! And I can't ask who it is, right?
No, I'll tell you right now. It's Christian Rodriguez and Taylor Alfaro.
Oh.
But they know it. There's no secret. Like but the thing is right afterwards they're hugging each other and laughing.
After they beat the shit out of each other.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness. So you're like the principal in there.
Yeah, man, sometimes.
Marco Martinez is a bit off topic, but I want to hear Chad's opinion. If you're on the undercard of a fight like Saturday's, what does it do to you as a fighter to be completely ignored? Pettis and Hawley have gotten zero hype. So I guess he's asking, what happens when you're on an undercard of a huge fight like that and you're basically ignored?
Well, here's the thing. You're getting ignored by certain media streams, right? Because it is a big fight. You just being in that venue, you being a part of that iconic card is a big deal. I'm sure they have tons of interviews and stuff that they're actually on, but even at that point, they're focused on the fight. It gives them a chance to really focus on just the fight itself and not all the other bullshit. Because the media stuff is whatever. It is what it is. However your fight goes, you're going to go up in those rankings regardless. You're going to be on all the promotional material on what happened at the event. If you make something amazing happen, you're going to be in the highlights. Fantastic. So it is what it is. Like, a lot of people get carried away with the fact that I didn't get the promotion that I thought I was deserving. Okay, so smash this person and then make them pay attention the next time around.
Well, Chad, before we continue, I want to mention that, not only is Chad George a great friend, but he's a great motivator. He's a great coach. He's a great fighter. And, look at him. I mean, he's got the gift of gab. We're sitting here off the dome, just having a conversation. We've already been 20 minutes into this, so I just want to implore everybody on the chat right now. I am going to put the link to it in the description after this video, but if you guys can, on YouTube after this video, search for Savage Hour Podcast. It's a podcast that Chad's working on. It's going to have weekly episodes every Wednesday at 7 p.m. It's incredibly motivational. It'll help you with your personal development, and it's definitely something that I think everybody should check out. You could also follow it at the Savage Hour Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. So definitely check that out, guys, if you haven't already. Muay Thai 23 says, Chad, I have a bad knee and right shoulder, which has slowed down my training in BJJ. What advice would you give me?
Well, are you recreational or are you looking to compete? That's the biggest question, right? A lot of guys that have these injuries, and it's like, well, what are we trying to achieve with it? A lot of times these injuries can easily be worked around if we're trying to be a fitness enthusiast. You can work around that. If it's to compete, then you gotta really look at it and say, okay, what kind of rehab can I do? What kind of extent are the injuries that I have? And what am I actively doing to really battle the injuries?
I think Muay Thai 23 is actually out of SBG, where
very cool.
McGregor trained. So it's interesting to have somebody from overseas in here. I always love to have people from overseas on the chat. Marco Martinez asks, does hype matter to a fighter leading up to a fight? I would imagine it matters a lot.
Well, I think here's the thing. Here's the crazy thing about it. Sometimes the hype can take the athlete out of their element, and they think they're a superstar, and they don't have to start keep training. Look what happened in the last big boxing, the heavyweight fight. He had all the hype on him in the world, and then he just stopped training, gained all this extra weight, and looked like shit in the fight. Yeah. So hype can really get to a fighter's head. I mean, look at also what happened to Conor. Right? Like hype can be a poisonous drug if you let it get to you. Now, if you can stay humble around it, if you can stay focused, that's a different story. But man, the exposure and the lights and the cameras on you, it really just feeds into whatever monster you already are. And if you have a little bit of ego, it's going to inflate whatever you have.
So that hype, I mean, that's one type of hype.
Yeah.
The other hype I was thinking of with that question is sort of like the taiko drumming and the walkout music and stuff like that. I mean, do you believe that that's for you personally? Because I imagine it's subjective. Was that important to you as a fighter?
Well, I went through a lot of different phases. You know what I mean? I went through the phases where I was trying to put on a show. I went through phases where I was trying to act like something I wasn't. I went through phases where I was finally in the moment. You know what I mean? Like, so everything's different. But it would be just along the same lines as saying, why does a fighter need a walkout song? That we walk out to the same song over and over because it puts us in a certain mindset. And I think when you have like the taiko drummers and whatever it is, I think that sets an ambience. I think how the show really brings the fighters out, it sets a certain tone to what that athlete's going to be bringing, or at least the show itself. But I think it's to the individual. I know a lot of fighters that are terrified backstage. They hear your music and they change. I mean, Mike Tyson talked about this stuff where he'd be freaking out backstage, and as he's walking to the ring, he's getting more and more confident until he turns into an animal the moment he walks into the ropes. So everybody has different triggers that get them into the groove that what they need into the fight. Like I was listening to this thing with Cowboy Talk. They said, well, how do you know you're gonna be ready? He goes, I'm ready right now. He goes, but they go, great. Are you gonna be ready fight night? He goes, we'll see fight night. He goes, in fact, we'll see. I could be completely ready walking out there, and all of a sudden you step in and nope, not feeling it tonight.
You've got a fight.
I got a jiu-jitsu match, yes.
Well, jiu-jitsu match, that's this weekend,
I have
right?
a super fight this weekend. That's what they call it, super fight, yeah.
You have a super fight this weekend. Tell me how you get yourself in the zone, how you get yourself hyped for this weekend's fight.
Well, now the way I am now is a lot different. The way I've fought in the cage against some of the best guys in the world, and now when I do jiu-jitsu, I'm having fun. Yeah, I'm still competing against some of the most elite grapplers in the world, but now I can go out there and laugh and I have fun. Like, I realize that I don't need to make this big deal of this anymore, because we put this front on where we need to make this mad dog face. Listen, that's all games. It's like, just go out there and do your job. If you have the confidence in yourself and your abilities, you'll be able to go out there and just perform. And so I'm competing on the Fight to Win stage this weekend in Sacramento, and I'm competing against a great black belt. And I'm excited. I'm an MMA guy that is crossed over into the jiu-jitsu world. And it's really great to be able to be seen as an elite grappler with these guys coming from an MMA background. I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt, but I find myself more connected with the roots of jiu-jitsu and what jiu-jitsu is than I do any other art of it. And so when I go compete now, I'm having fun. I'm having fun competing, win or lose. It's about your own self-discovery, and it's about finding out more tools of how I can get better for the next outing.
So just to clarify, you came from MMA and then picked up jiu-jitsu along the way, or?
So I grew up wrestling. Yeah. I started wrestling, but when I was doing MMA, I was doing everything together. Of course, I was doing some jiu-jitsu, I was doing some boxing, doing some, Muay Thai, but it wasn't until, this process, 15 years now, has been going, that I fell in love with jiu-jitsu. And it wasn't until I was about a brown belt where it really clicked to me how amazing jiu-jitsu was and how it was relatable so much to life.
Guys, if you like what you're seeing, please subscribe, hit the bell notification icon. Feel free to donate to the channel. Anything you guys donate or any of the purchases you make below, like a Fighters Rep shirt and the links below, it's all reinvested into the channel and back into the promotion. February 28th is Fighters Rep 9, and Chad will have a couple guys on that show. Mark Martinez asks, what made Chad want to coach? And I mean, this question I don't think is as obvious as it sounds, because not every fighter can be a great coach.
Right.
And I do think, the fact that you can communicate so well probably helps you as a coach. But I mean, what made you want to become a coach, Chad?
Well, there's a couple things. I have a passion for helping other people. And I see these guys that are going through the same struggles and the battles and what they want to achieve with their career that I did. And I want to be able to give them a platform that I never had, because when I was first getting into this, there was nobody to tell me, hey, this is what you should do, this is how you can apply this is how you can learn this. It was like we were trying to figure this shit out in the wild, wild west. I mean, my first pro fight was in Tijuana, Mexico, because it was still illegal here. So these guys that have these access abilities to be able to go on, I can fight a kickboxing fight this weekend, I can go to a jiu-jitsu tournament next weekend, I can do an amateur MMA fight, whatever it is, you can really build this amazing skill set and create a career and build a foundation with it. And I really enjoy watching these guys develop, especially like our junior athletes. I love watching them come into the gym and seeing them grow as individuals. And if I can have my hand and be able to help them achieve something amazing, then that makes me just the happiest guy in the world.
What are qualities that you possess that you think help you be such a great coach? Because I mean, you probably don't want to judge yourself, but I think you're a fantastic coach, just based on what I've seen and your guys competing on my events. And I mean, you guys, let's just face it, the numbers, you can't deny the numbers. You guys win a lot more than you lose. So what do you think it is that makes you such a great coach?
I think that I'm very connected with my athletes, and I expect only of them what I would expect of myself. I'm not that guy that says you have to do this. Listen, none of us have to do anything. All I can do is lead by example and go through the things that I've done through my career and try to tell them, don't make the same mistakes that I've made. And I try to create a culture with these guys of them wanting to be the best versions of themselves. And I think that's what makes these guys do well in competition, because I'm sure there's a certain degree of them not wanting to let me down, but I've finally found a way to get these guys to not want to let themselves down.
That sounds actually pretty deep, man. Malik Abdul Mu'min in the chat says, do you think amateur MMA fighters have so few fights because it's been around, or it's not been around as long as boxing? Why do MMA fighters, or why don't MMA fighters have like 30 to 40 amateur fights?
Well, because that's actually a good question. Because boxing, you can go to a tournament twice a month, and you can get 6 to 10 fights in a tournament. MMA doesn't have that access. What you don't see is, though, you talk about, MMA fights, but look at these guys that are doing jiu-jitsu tournaments. My guys probably have 100 jiu-jitsu matches in them before they go pro. I've got one of my amateurs, Cody Davis. He's 7-0 as a fighter. He's a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. He's won numerous jiu-jitsu tournaments. I couldn't even tell you how many matches he's had. He's had a boxing fight, a couple of Muay Thai fights. So you don't see all the culmination of the background stuff. And his next fight, win or lose, will be his last amateur.
Wow, so he's going to be going pro.
Yeah, so his next fight will be his last amateur.
Wow, okay. And he's also state champion in California.
Two-time state champion right now.
Okay. So Gabriel Valverde says, amen, that's why I always come out to a worship song. It's God that put me there and gave me the talent to fight. So, I guess that's Gabriel Valverde's way of getting himself hyped up. He's actually fought on a couple fighters rep cards.
Very cool.
So a very intense fighter. Guy very calm outside the ring or cage, but very intense on the inside. And I really enjoy watching him fight. Hopefully you come back, Gabriel. Marco Martinez has another question for Chad. In an interview with ESPN, Conor talked about how much money LeBron has spent on his own health and wellness and how he has spent none. Now that you are retired, what do you preach to your fighters in self-care, regarding self-care?
Listen, I think that's one of the biggest things that guys don't do. And I'm guilty of it as well. I have so many injuries, and that's partially why it was time for me to step away when I did. I retired this year. But I've got herniations in my neck, I've got herniations in my back, I've already had back surgery, I've got knee issues. It's most of us, especially quote unquote tough guys, we don't want to take care of things until it's too late. And rehabbing things once it's been injured is usually the only way we'll actually admit something's going on. And I really, really stress to guys that take care of this stuff now. Do your stretching, do your massage, do yoga, do everything that you can to be restorative now. That way, so it's preventative and not just based on the measures after it's already happened.
What would you say is the most important aspect of self-care as a fighter? Or is it a culmination of everything?
I think it's a culmination of everything, but I think the biggest thing with self-care is just know your body. Know your limits. Don't spar with guys that are bigger than you. Don't do things that it's going to be based on ego. Those are the things that are always going to get you hurt.
What's something that you would, tell yourself maybe 10 years, 15 years back that you think would have been the most helpful in preserving your body? Be it stretching or
looking back on it, here's the thing. My level of warm-ups back then, it was literally like we'd get into the gym, we would fight, and we would go home. Like, that's how it was. It wasn't come in, train, let's do some drills. It was like, let's get in here, let's fight, and then I'll see you tomorrow. Like, I don't want to fucking talk to you because we just got done fighting, and I'll see you tomorrow. And so,
this is how it was back in the day.
Man.
Yeah.
And,
not this lovely curriculum that you have now where, we run around the mat and then we do shadow boxing.
Let's call it what it is. Like, our classes that we have now, these are fitness-based classes that incorporate more of the elements of live training.
Sure.
But when our team is training, it's more live, but we drill things. But back then, man, it was like, hey, you got a fight coming up? All right, so let's go ahead and just start fighting. And that's how we get ready for it. And those are probably things that I wish I could go back on and be like, hey, maybe not get punched in the head by a guy 50 pounds bigger than you.
Well, that inspires a question from me, which is, I've always heard this debate about hard sparring, going all in, or light technical sparring, saving that energy and intensity for the fight. What is your take on that?
I think you need both. You need both. You need a lot of technical sparring, a lot of it. But every now and again, you do need to have that hard sparring because you need to know that it works in a high pressure situation when the adrenaline's high.
Mm-hmm. And how often would you say, hard sparring?
So my guys do it once or twice a week,
Hard sparring. Mm-hmm. And then the other days is just technical.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, but the biggest thing is listen, you can hard spar every day of the week as long as you don't take a big shot. If you take a big shot, okay. You need to take a break, take a week or two before you get hit again because, at the end of the day, we only have one brain.
That's true. That's true. And I felt like mine came out of my ear one time when I was hard sparring there.
You've never hard sparred a day in your life.
I tried. Marco Martinez, when you have a new student who's basically starting from scratch, what makes you think when that fighter is ready for that first MMA amateur fight?
Well, that's actually a good question as well, because I actually have a curriculum at my school that I require all of our potential fighters to go through. They have to actually get certification through our academy. It's called our Zero to Fight certification, where they have to know all the basic fundamentals of boxing, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, and then some of the aspects that we have at our school. And then they also have to show that they have the ability to go through our classes and then our sparring classes. Usually, I'll make them do a jiu-jitsu tournament as well before they do their first MMA fight.
Jamaican is in the chat. Thank you for joining, brother. He says, can fighters make a living off regional MMA, or do fighters have to do a second job, especially the guys not in the UFC?
Most guys have to do a second job, and here's the reality is most guys in the UFC have to have a second job.
Yeah.
Because think about it, like regional shows, you're going to get paid, a good payday on a regional show. You're talking $2,000 to show up, $2,000 to win. That's not a lot of money, especially what it takes to go into that. Then you've got to pay your coaches, you got to pay your managers. And let's look at the UFC. Let's say you get paid $15,000. Let's 15 and 15, right? Mm-hmm. Only one of those fighters are going to make that money. So that means if you're both making $15,000 to show up, and then only one of you is going to get the $15,000 to win. That guy that made 15 grand, that was potentially 3 months of work. So that's $5 grand a month pre-taxes. Then you got to pay your camps. Then you got to pay all the other things. You're not making much money. If you have a family, you're making sub $4,000.
What's crazy to me is that there's so many fighters in Southern California. There's so much talent, considering the cost of living here. I mean, it's absolutely insane. I mean, what kind of living conditions?
Listen, you can't live in LA without roommates. You can't. A lot of fighters have 4 or 5 people living in a house. You can't survive here without it. A lot of fighters, they teach classes, they do private lessons, they work part-time jobs. Now with the ability of like Uber and Lyft and Postmates, they can do things that work around their training schedule. So there's a lot of stuff you can do to supplement it. But I mean, you got to remember, the fighting lifestyle is not glamorous. If you want to be a fighter, you're going to have to really dedicate everything and be willing to do essentially what I did, and that's risk everything. And no matter how long it takes, you're going to have to just kind of eat on shit for a while.
Now, people can delve into this a bit more at your new channel, the Savage Hour podcast, which obviously, we're helping out with, we're working on together, and I'm very proud to be a part of that with you and help you build up your motivational speaking brand there at the Savage Hour podcast. But you were in these situations where I think you mentioned you had to be homeless a couple times and live out of a car. I mean, if you can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, my situation is different than most. Like the first time that I was homeless was because I chose to leave a career and pursue this fighting career where there was no opportunities at the time. So I said, you know what? I can always go back to the art field. I was a professional artist. I can always go back to this. So, but in the meantime, you know what? I'm gonna risk it. I'm gonna say, you know what? I'm gonna pursue this fighting thing. I don't know where it's gonna go, but I'm gonna be all in. And that's something that I could say that I've been able to do most of my life. And is when I commit myself to something, I'm in. And that's what a lot of these guys do. They commit themselves, but they're not all in for how long it takes. They're all in for 6 months. They're all in for a year. And then when the hardship hits, then it's like, all right, I got to figure something out. Like, no, that's what it means to pursue something. It doesn't mean when it's easy. Like, if you're going to pursue something, you got to do it. And then I look at myself and I still feel like I'm still pursuing this. And I just can look back and say, holy shit, it's been 15 years.
Obviously, this is from a totally different standpoint and profession. But, I used to hear that David Banner, the rapper producer, who eventually got pretty big, that he actually chose to, even though I think he had a postgraduate degree, decided to just live out of his car and sell his mixtapes and whatnot out of his car. And eventually he made it by doing that. So, I mean, You say it was a choice the first time. Was it a choice the second time?
Well, the second time around, I was in a relationship that had ended, and I was in a fight camp. And when we split, I had nowhere to go, so I moved into the gym, and I started just sleeping on the ring for the remainder of that whole camp. So that was a shorter stint. But even with that one, that was like, okay, I don't know where I'm gonna go. I got nowhere to go. I'm in the WEC, and I've got to figure this out. So you know what? Instead of stressing, I'm gonna turn lemons into lemonade, and I'm gonna live in the gym, and I'm gonna do what I can.
Anything to just, achieve the goals.
I mean, that's what it is, right? A lot of people make the excuses why they can't instead of finding out why they can. They like to look at the hardships and play the woe is me factor, or because of this I couldn't do that. It's like, no, the answer is you chose to quit. That's really the answer. It doesn't matter what comes in front of you. Like, if you chose to quit, that means you chose to quit. You can always find ways around things. Yeah, hardships are going to happen to all of us. But you still have a choice. Do you keep pushing forward past the hardships?
I feel like that's such a source of depression and anxiety and so much bullshit that people go through mentally. Why is it so hard, Chad, for people to just say, I'm going to keep on fucking pushing, man. I can't give up now.
Man. Like, listen, as somebody who's been plagued with self-doubt and a lack of confidence their whole life, it's painful. It's painful to have upset after upset. It's painful to keep telling people why this didn't work. It's painful to have the people closest to you to tell you that, like, maybe you should do something else. That's painful, man.
Yeah.
But if you truly believe it, you'll do what it takes to get there. It doesn't matter. But the question you got to ask yourself is, am I doing enough? Am I really giving my all? Am I not cutting any shortcuts? And the answer usually is there's shortcuts that are being made.
Yeah. Holding yourself accountable is
that's the biggest thing, man. Like, the mirror doesn't lie.
Yeah. It's a hard thing, though, man.
It's the hardest thing, and I got to deal with it daily.
Yeah.
Daily, we all have to deal with it daily. Like, whatever version I am today, tomorrow I have to be able to figure out how to handle that version.
Yeah.
But right now, today, okay.
I'm gonna ask you one for myself. This one's for myself. I want to be the biggest, baddest kickboxing promotion. That's the goal for me. The goal for me is to be the glory of the United States and maybe one day supersede them. But it's so hard. There's so much to do. I always feel like there's something I can do. But I mean, if I just keep doing, I'm also gonna go nuts. You know what I mean? I mean, how do I balance that? You know what I mean? How do I balance that?
I'm the wrong person with that because I'm all over the place. Like, I don't stop. I don't stop.
Yeah.
I think that there's got to be a certain bit of crazy. You got to be a little nuts to be able to pursue trying to be great at something. There's a reason why not everybody's there. If you want to be the best, there's got to be something different about you. There's got to be a work ethic that's different about you, and that's why you got guys like Conor McGregor, like this coming weekend. Like, there's something different, and that's why they set themselves apart. If not, everybody else will be able to rise to what it takes to get there. But man, to be the greatest, you have to be on a whole level of your own.
Melekia is in the chat. What's up, my brother? He said Stipe Miocic is still a firefighter. Talking about employment and fighting. And he also says only a handful of the guys in the UFC are making good money.
Yep.
So I guess forget about the regional shows. Even the guys in the UFC are not making that much money, not enough to live, especially down here in Southern California. Marco says, have you had a fighter who was poor performing that you had to tell not to fight, or do you let them keep trying?
No, I mean, my job is to protect my guys, right? And, this is where the athlete and coach can really bump heads. Like, I've got a guy right now where I told him he's got to start taking fundamental classes again before I let him fight. That's my job. My job is to make sure that we're taking care of these athletes and allowing them to perform to their own best abilities. Now, he could leave my academy and he could say, all right, you know what, he didn't believe me and he's going to go somewhere else. By inflating somebody's ego isn't going to get them better. The only way they're going to get better is by checking their own ego and realizing, okay, I need to work on X, Y, and Z, and that's why I'm not doing well.
Has there ever been a point where a guy told you, I want to be a fighter, I'm going to be a fighter, and you just look at them and the talent's not there, and you just had to break it to them? I mean, that's
of course. And that they usually leave the gym. They go somewhere else.
I see. Muay Thai 23 says, Chad, what would you tell fighters that bottle it every time they fight? And fighting is not for them. You should tell them it's not for them, but instead you don't want to be a negative person towards them, so you keep trying to motivate them all the time to keep trying. I mean, it sounds like Chad's not really that kind of person. You would probably just tell them, hey, this is not for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's going back to the drawing board. Like, hey, let's figure these things out, and then once we address some major issues, we'll try it again. But that individual needs to look deep inside and figure out why they're fighting.
And I mean, again, the Savage Hour podcast is based so much in mindset and mental strength. What is one mental lapse or one mental issue that you see the most as a coach in the fight game?
True self-belief. Fighters.
There was no hesitation there.
Yeah, it's huge. Because I know I'm guilty of this, where a lot of fighters, we give way more credit to our opponent than we give to ourselves. Oh, well, why did he take this fight against me? What does he know that I don't? No different than why you took the fight against him. It's just, all of a sudden, you're like, I'm standing in front of this guy, but why did he take this fight against me? You're both equally scared, but we tend to give way more power to the opposition that's in front of us.
And why do you think that is?
It's the fear of the unknown. You don't know what this threat brings in front of you. You don't know if you could take his punch. You don't know if he's just going to walk through yours. You just don't know. It's the fear of the unknown, and that's what we're all afraid of.
Muay Thai 23 says subscribed to Chad's channel. Appreciate that. Awesome. Muay Thai 23. Definitely something we're working on.
Tell your friends.
Yeah.
We're going to blow this thing up, and it's going to be the most impactful mindset podcast in the world.
I love it, man. And we're sipping here, sipping our whiskey, talking about the fights. I'm constantly motivated by the stuff I've seen, from you, obviously at the gym as well. So I'm excited to get that material out there. Marco Martinez says, another question for Chad. What could a promoter do that would make you not want to take your fighters back to their events? I'm sure that's never happened to you, Chad.
There's a lot of stuff, I guess it depends on the individual, but the biggest thing is just not respecting my athletes. I think it's really important to make sure that the fighters that are out there putting their health on the line, just get their due respect prior to and during.
One aspect of the mental game, and this is going back to mindset, that sticks out for me as someone who played sports, growing up, was the difference in ability between practice and between the actual game. I remember, clear as day that, I felt like I could run so fast on the track, but then when you line up at the blocks, you're scared shitless. Or basketball, I'd be tearing it up in practice, but then the game would happen and I would just be a nervous wreck. I mean, is that something that you see a lot in the fight game, where guys in training are nowhere near meeting their?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Anytime that there's something on the line, we put more emphasis on what can go wrong. I heard this analogy years ago, and it's something that stuck with me. It's the 2x4 analogy, right? So, and I'm gonna do this with you. So, George, let me ask you this: if I put a 2x4 on the floor, right, just right here on the floor, I'm put a 2x4. And I say, hey, I'm going to pay you $100. Can you walk on that 2x4? What are you going to say?
Say, hell yeah, get your $100 ready.
Right, exactly. Okay, but the task is what? The task is to walk on that 2x4 for $100. You're like, no problem. Okay, same task. I'm going to raise that 2x4 say 2 feet. 2 feet. 2 feet off the ground. But now I'm going to double your thing. I'm going to pay you $200 now. $200 to walk on a 2x4, 2 feet off the ground.
Let's go, champ.
Let's go, right? No problem. Same task. Okay, but I'm going to raise the odds. Raise the ante. Now I'm going to raise it 5 feet up. 5 feet. 5 feet. It's a little bit taller than me,
Come on.
5 feet. But I'm going to pay you $1,000. I'm going to pay you $1,000. to walk on a 5-foot 2x4. Same task.
Easy work.
Easy work. Okay, but I'm going to change your life. I'm going to raise it up a mile in the sky. Mile in the sky. I'm going to pay you $100,000 to walk on it. There's no ropes, nothing on it.
Fuck to the no, brother.
But it's the same task.
But I could die.
But it's the same task. That's my point, right? So the point of the analogy is that it's the same task, but all of a sudden the stakes are raised. And we build these things in our head of what could go wrong every time the stake is raised.
Interesting. And in a fight, you could die.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's the big difference between sparring and fighting, going back to the whole point of this episode.
Jamaican says, I find myself listening to Phil Collins' Deontay Wilder walkout song against Brazil on a daily basis. Which song do you listen to before a fight, Chad George? And what will you be listening to before your super fight?
When I do, actually, I stopped listening to music. I stopped listening to music.
Wow.
When I compete, I want to be in my own head.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, I really enjoy myself being in the moment of what's happening. You know, I've come out from everything from Common to my last fight. I came out to Queen. You know, but that was more for the audience. And when I'm backstage now or when I'm competing, I just like to be in the moment. I like to feel the energy, and I like to truly be like right there.
That's interesting. You also mentioned to me that when you go running, you also don't put any music in your ears, so you can just be engaged in the moment.
Yep.
Marco Martinez says, before I go, I want to ask Chad who he likes in women's MMA. This weekend is a couple awesome matchups, including Macy Barber, Claudia Gadelha, and Holly Holm against Raquel Pennington. Is there anyone you like in women's MMA, Chad?
I mean, there's some fighters that I do like. This is gonna sound sour, but I'm not a big follower of women's MMA. Not because I don't think they're good fighters. I think that it's just I have a very little amount of time to actually watch fights anymore, and there's just not too many that grab me enough to where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna sit down and watch this fight. You know, Holly Holm's a great striker. Claudia is a great fighter. I don't even know who's fighting who right now. You know, to be honest, you know, I have athletes fighting every single weekend and taking me all over the place. So I don't have an answer for that right now, unfortunately.
And you're going to be at your super fight on Saturday.
I'm going to be at my super fight on Saturday. My wife's going to be watching it at home on Flow Grappling. So for you guys that do have Flow Grappling that are familiar, I will be competing on Fight to Win 135 on Saturday. My event time, I go on at 5:48. It's pretty much like if you've never seen Fight to Win, it's like the UFC of professional jiu-jitsu.
Very nice. But that means, I mean, there's no chance that we're going to be able to get to see the Conor Cowboy fight together.
Well, remember, I go on at 5:48, so I'm sure I can find a place to watch it.
But not with me.
That's true.
It's pretty sad.
Well, maybe you could watch with my girl, and maybe you guys can get together. Maybe that's how it can all go down.
Pretty weird.
Because she's still looking for a place to watch it.
Oh, that's true.
I was gonna watch it.
You come hang out with me and Bello, cook you some lobsters.
Nice.
Make Chad really jealous. Jamaican says, keep up the good work, George. Pound to bless up. And by George, I'm sure he means me and Chad the Savage. George, thank you for the love and the generosity. He just donated $2.79 Canadian dollars. Always generous. My brother Jamaican, thank you for that. Definitely, if you guys haven't already, please continue to support us and support Chad, the Savage Hour podcast. I want you guys to subscribe to that if you haven't. It's going to be fantastic. I mean, the content's already, I think, really impressive. And, you know, now that you've got your boy at the helm, I think we're going to really get that motivation out there. Anything you want to say, Chad, before I let you go and before your big fight coming up, because we've already been on for almost 55 minutes sitting here chatting away.
Mindset is everything. Being a champion is a choice.
I love it. And before we go, Jamaican says, I might be wrong, but it was disgusting watching Conor and Cowboy blow each other at the press conference. I think Habib humbled him. And Muay Thai says, see you on your channel, Chad. So much love to you guys. Thank you guys for joining me and Chad on this Whiskey and Chad episode. was supposed to be a debate, but Chad kind of fizzled me out pretty quick. I just do what he tells me at this point, so I don't get put in a chokehold or anything. But knuckleheads, thank you guys for joining. Obviously, we do this every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Pacific, and immediately after all the big fights, we'll be on immediately after that Conor Cowboy fight. So thank you guys for joining. Hit subscribe, and until next time, keep it clean, knuckleheads. Tell them to subscribe, Chad. Maybe they'll listen to you.
Subscribe. There, wherever it's at.
There you are. Thank you, Chad.